imagine taking a walk downtown on a sunny spring day. Some of y'all look at me like y'all know what sunny spring day is. But you see tourists at the Bean, you pass that art installation that just projects people's faces looking at each other that we pretend makes sense. And suddenly you hear a shallow thud on the ground. You look down, you see a bird gasping for air. And before the confusion even sets in, you hear another thud, and another, and another, until it's a drum roll. And when you look up, you see that hundreds of birds have fallen from the sky. Some fly away immediately, some struggle to walk, others die on contact. Experts rush to the scene and they examine the birds and they say, this one spent too much time around the wrong birds. This one didn't come from a two-parent nest. They find all these individual reasons that birds are falling from the sky, and still the next day, more birds fall out of the sky. And they rush back and they test and they confirm the problems with these individual birds. And they diagnose and treat, and birds keep falling from the sky. At what point do we look up and say there's something wrong with the sky? At what point do we learn that the birds are not the problem, but the symptom of conditions that weren't meant for their survival? At what point do we recognize that we actually created a sky that's hostile to the birds, and now we're blaming them for falling? That's what it feels like to lead from a community-based perspective in Chicago. To be screaming there's something wrong with the sky, and to be told to measure the birds. It was about 10 years ago when I took a 14-year-old named Charles Macklin to Buffalo Wild Wings. He had won a trip with me as an incentive for a positive change in his behavior at school. I didn't know Charles. I didn't teach him in any of my classes. I think he chose me because he wanted to spend time with a black male teacher. In Chicago, black men make up about 4% of the teaching force. When we got to the restaurant, he walks right past the host stand and into the dining room. I said, hey man, where you going? Come back. He's like, I'm going to where you ordered the food. Now you need to wait. He's arguing with me about where to go. Come here, just wait. We go and get seated, and we had a ball. We ate like kings. We made bets on football games where the loser had to eat the hottest wing that was there. And when we finished, you know how some people pack up the table to make cleanup easier for the hostess? Charles started doing that, but he was doing a real thorough job. Like, he was cleaning the heck out of the table. And I just sat back, okay, I guess this is just what he does. But then he said, all right, Mr. Cannon, where's the trash can? And that's when I realized he'd never been to a sit-down restaurant before. You had the initial chuckle of amusement, and then you have the realization, what else hasn't he done? What can he experience in his environment? He didn't have much more time to explore. 3 years later, Charles was shot and killed while attempting to steal a car. His last words were, sorry, bro. The coverage of his death highlighted a wayward teen, a lack of home training, choices and consequences, all the reasons this bird fell from the sky in an area where birds are plummeting every day. We can examine Charles's choices and family structure and friend group and say, here's why he fell, or we can take a closer look at the environment and ask why so many are falling. We can ask what reliable outcomes can be produced in an area where black boys don't have black male teachers, or have never been to a sit-down restaurant, or ridden on an elevator, or gone on a hike at a state park, or seen the lake in their hometown. We can look up at the sky. That's what most of us here believe we do. We search for root causes. But whose solutions are we searching for? As someone who desperately wants to stop birds from falling, I find that the best way to find resources is go and ask somebody who polluted the sky in the first place. Usually through intermediaries who take our work and reshape it in ways that are appealing to people who benefit from the root cause of the problem. The result is a funder-centric, activity-driven sector that's struggling to answer the same questions it asked 4 decades ago. For all the measurements, all the funding, all the efforts and well-meaning, we're not producing results, we're producing good feelings because we're solving problems for people instead of with people. That's a realization I had when I started the block. For all the convenings adults were having to figure out how to reach young people were already telling us. And there's a particular group of young people who we were determined to ignore. They were showing us what they wanted, but they spoke with their fists. Fights in school, fights on the streets, knocking out random people downtown. And the solution our society has always had has been to treat them like a problem, to control them, exclude them, and punish them. I knew that didn't work. Still, as a humanities teacher in the school, when kids learned that I was a national champion boxer, I couldn't help but tell them. And asked me to start a boxing program in the school, I resisted. This is not the solution that the adults are asking for. And I could just hear it. They're already fighting too much, and now you want to show them how? Kids were telling us they wanted an outlet for rage, a group of peers that they resonated with, and access to supportive adults. And we were giving them detention, curfews, and tutoring programs. We were trying to force top-down changes on them instead of changing the inputs in their environment. The more clear it became that our approach wasn't working, the more convinced I became that they were right. So I did the only reasonable thing in that situation. Started a boxing club in my classroom. We started with 12 kids. We moved the tables and chairs out of the way. We had some boxing lessons and kick it with kids. And a miraculous thing happened. Not only were they reaching their own goals in fitness and in boxing and in their personal lives, but they were reaching the goals that were important to the adults. Their GPAs grew to an average of 3.18. They outgrew their classmates on the ACT about 40%. The school attendance increased, and disciplinary reports decreased. It was working. So the next year I made the program bigger. Same results. A year after that, I started inviting kids from surrounding schools to come to this program. We had 80 kids coming to this boxing program after school. But trouble was brewing because the higher ups, the experts, the central office, the landlords, learned what we were doing, and they decided, without talking to me, any kids who were involved, or even seeing the program, that it was unacceptable. They claimed that we presented a safety and security risk, and they forced me to shut the program down with kids on the bus and train on the way to see us. I had made a change to their sky, but they feared the birds. So I did the only reasonable thing to do in that situation. I decided to leave my job at the end of the year, focus full-time at the block. The kids had told me, I'll take a clap for that. The kids had told me what would work for them. And despite my reservations and the objections of the other adults and experts, they were right. And I had to act on that. The block has grown from an after-school program to a community that partners with over 500 young people a year. With boxing as our core, we surround fighters with academic, social-emotional, vocational, and critical needs resources that all kids deserve, but kids on the Chicago's West Side are asked to live without. And it works. First, let me say, we don't turn down any kid who wants to come to the block. If you want to be a part of the block, you just say so and you're with us. So unlike other programs that put up barriers and say you have to have these grades, you have to have this behavior, you're one of us the moment you decide to be. Even with that, we have a 99% high school graduation rate, a 99% college acceptance rate. Fighters have ended each school year with an average GPA of 3.2 or higher. Not a single fighter in our program has ever increased their involvement in the juvenile justice system. Whether you're talking about education, violence prevention, physical fitness, out of school time, the block is a change to a young person's environment that produces the results that they want and that we need as a society. But even with all that, the outcomes, the stories, the metrics, we still find resistance in getting support. Not because the impact isn't there, but because boxing doesn't sit well with people in power. It doesn't sound like the kind of intervention you're going to find in a strategy deck or a white paper. It's too gritty. It's too close to the anger that we rather pathologize and understand. And so, despite doing the work that people say they want, community-rooted, youth-led, data-backed, we get told that our approach is uncomfortable. And let me say it plainly. If comfort is your prerequisite to supporting an organization, no matter how well-meaning you may be, you're not investing in change. You're investing in control. This is the kind of contradiction that forces us to ask, who gets to define what's valid? Who gets to decide what methods are worthy of investment? And who do we trust to lead us toward change? That's why I want to offer 3 calls to action, not just for funders in the room, but for all of us working to build a new sky. First is to break the echo chamber. I didn't get my first grant because of the quality of my program. I got my first grant because I met a wealthy white man who introduced me to his friends who happened to be wealthy white men, and one was the CEO of the foundation. He told me to put in the grant application, and he approved that grant application without ever seeing my program. Listen, he was right, don't get me wrong. But that first grant, that first 5-figure infusion we ever got as an organization did more than just fund our work. It gave me something even more powerful in this realm. That's credibility. Every single grant application asked me who else funds our work. And until that point, I had nothing to put. I left that blank. Once I got this name that was recognizable, that other people knew and respected, I started getting more yeses. Same grant application, same program, same methods, more yeses. Eventually, those names that I got to put on that list compounded. And here's what it taught me. In this realm, my proximity to wealth and whiteness is more important than my program quality. This is what happens when philanthropy listens more to its own networks than the people doing the work. Funders talk to each other. They move in the same circles. They fund what feels familiar until familiarity feels like merit. I don't think I heard that. I didn't even run my back because I did not react strong enough to that. I said they fund, and I forgot. I was in there, until it feels like merit. They fund. I was rolling. I want the line back. No. That's not all the funders' fault. Many nonprofits reinforce this by competing for approval instead of collaborating for change. But here's the truth. If you want to support community-led solutions, you have to start by listening to community leaders, even above and beyond your peers who are not rooted in community. Otherwise, you're not funding impacts, you're funding familiarity. What would happen if we stopped asking nonprofits who else is funding them, and instead asked them, who should we fund? If you trust us as leaders and experts in our communities, we can't just be seen as credible once we pass somebody else's test. If you're funding us, and if we're worth funding, we're worth believing. If you're a leader with access, stop waiting for a funder to ask. Understand that putting somebody else on is not gonna stop you from getting it better. Every funder you know, every funder you talk to should hear the name of another organization that's worth funding. Because if funders want to support community work, they need our help, even if they don't know it. Access is not power unless you open the doors for somebody else. And still, access alone won't be enough. Proximity will get you in the room, but staying in the room is going to take something else entirely. That takes me to my second call to action. Commit long term. Change makers in the social sector support nonprofits that they believe in. There's a broad recognition that the problems that we face didn't just come up today. They're based on centuries of policies and practices and often violence. Our partners know that we are 100 years in to a 1,000-year fight, and we get 2-year grants, with impact reports due 10 months after the check hits. It's a long-term vision with short-term commitments, and funder priorities change without community input. But change doesn't move at the speed of quarterly metrics. And community needs don't change with the trends of the sector. Real generational change moves slowly, because it's not just about programming. It's about healing and reimagining systems and empowering people who've been told their whole lives they don't get to lead. I shared this contradiction with my friends at the Seabury Foundation, and they followed up with our first ever 10-year grant. They said, we believe in you today, we'll believe in you tomorrow, let's stop this song and dance and go get some work done. That means funding through mistakes. That means funding through years where the metrics don't sparkle, funding me and other leaders who are still building the plane as we fly it because nobody gave us a runway. Don't ask us to fix in 3 years what it took our country to break in 300. Stay and make your commitment clear. Long enough for the work to make a change, and long enough for the work to change you. Because while your grant may be for 2 years, the sky we're trying to build will take generations. My last call to actions is just for the nonprofits in the room. Stop whispering in huddles. I was part of a grantee cohort that got an email from our funder. It was asked, let's say it just asked us to jump. That was a task. I had the task attached to it. They were asking us to jump. I looked at it and thought, okay, it's a little extra work, but I ain't mad about it. I'll do it, whatever. But before I could get started, I got a text. And I was in a group chat with all the other CEOs in this cohort, and they did not want to jump. You know, can you believe they're asking us to jump? I got better things to do than jump. Why are we about to do this? Now, I was chilling. I didn't think the jump was that high, but if y'all mad, I'm mad. So, we're going to do. Next thing you know, I'm on the call, and we're listing out all the reasons why we shouldn't be asked to jump, and why it was inappropriate and unreasonable in the first place. Then I asked, okay, so how are we going to get this information across to them? They say, you know, they are a funder, so we don't want to tread too heavily. I don't think we should all go together. How about you tell them, Jamyle? I was chilling. Unanimous agreement, by the way. So I said, okay. I set up a call with the CEOs, with the funder CEO, and I explained, we saw your request. We found it unreasonable given the time that we're in and the size of our organizations. We don't think this is something that we should do. Let's talk about what we can do instead. And this CEO took a pause and said to me, thank you. When you say it, it makes so much sense, but we had never considered it from that perspective before. I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. Now, I was surprised, but I wanted to make sure we were good, so I said, I just want to make sure that me and my peers won't be penalized for not doing this task. She said, oh no, Jamyle, they already did it. They did it almost immediately. That's when I realized the problem isn't just the power dynamic, it's the silence around it. It's courage and commitment. It's a willingness to rub someone the wrong way to say what's right. Too many leaders are whispering in huddles about what's wrong and then go silent when it's time to respond. This only alienates community leaders who are willing to speak up. We can't build collective power through private frustration. We can't claim solidarity and then sprint for self-preservation. And we can't expect philanthropy to shift if we just agree and play along. If something is unjust, let's name it together. If a request is unreasonable, let's respond together. If we know what's right, let's stand in it together. And if you have to stand for what's right by yourself, do it. Not just for yourself, but for everybody else who comes after. Because silence keeps us isolated, and isolated leaders don't change the sky. They just try to fly it along. Changing the sky means funding differently, listening differently, leading differently. It means valuing proximity to community more than we value proximity to power. It means staying long enough for trust to take root. And it means having the courage to speak out, not just in group texts, but in the rooms where decisions are made. It means standing up to say, we won't play by the rules that were never meant for us to win. So whether you're in philanthropy, nonprofit leadership, or just trying to build a better sky, this is the invitation. Stop measuring burdens and start changing the sky. Thank you.